All right. Shalom, everybody. Rob Van Hoff here with Rob on the Rock and Telos Torah. Today I want to do a short note on some beautiful Hebrew text here from Genesis 45. Our Torah portion is called Vayyiggash. It extends from the middle of chapter 44 through all of chapter 47 of Genesis. And of course, this is this Torah portion where Joseph reveals himself, his true identity to his brothers. Is very moving, very powerful. And I want to look at this text here, just the first few verses of chapter 45, which I really love. And it begins, this is Joseph, after hearing his brother Judah's testimony, basically, and heart for not only his father, but Benjamin, and his willingness to put himself as surety for Benjamin, and says, take me in his place, but just whatever you do, let Benjamin go back. Real powerful moment in the Torah. But chapter 45 is awesome here at the beginning, where Joseph can't restrain himself anymore. And we're going to look at that here in the Hebrew, and we have the English in parallel. That's the NASB that I'm looking at. But it says, Velo Yachol Yosef Lehit apech lekol hanitzavim alav. Joseph was not able. Velo Yachol Yosef. Joseph was not able. And then we have an infinitive here from the Hitpael, Lehit apech. He was not able anymore to control himself. So we have the Hitpael here functioning, what we say reflexively, Lehit apech, to control himself. Lechol hanitzavim alav, before all those standing around him, basically, nitzavim alav, standing around him or standing by him. And then it continues, Vayikra hotziu lechol ish me'alai. And he said, every man go out, basically everybody go out from around me. He's like, clear the room, basically. And then it says, Velo amad ish ito, and no one stood with him. Behit vada Yosef el echav. Here we have a second Hitpael infinitive in the same verse. So Genesis 45:1, we have two infinitive constructs from the root Aleph Pei Kuf up here, Lehit Apek, and then we have another what we call infinitive construct in the Hitpael, but of course the root here is Yod Dalet Ayin. That's where we get the word Yada, to know. So it says Velo Amad Ish Ito Bahit Vada Yosef El Echav. When, and we translate that with the bet in front of the infinitive here as like a temporal clause. That is, when Joseph made himself known. So in both places here, Lehit Apek, we read that as to control himself, right? Reflexive. Here, Behit Vada, to make himself known. To make himself known to his brothers. So Joseph knew who he was the whole time. Joseph's not revealing himself to himself. He understands that they lack knowledge, and he's been exploiting that lack of knowledge to test their hearts in very many ways. And here, when Yehudah, his older brother, half-brother, I guess you could say, from Leah, of course, shows his true heart, and it moves Joseph he cannot contain this facade any longer. He has to share the truth. He has to share the knowledge, and that's this Behit Vada Yosef El Echav. And then verse 2, it says, Vayiten et kolo bevechi. He gave his voice with weeping. He gave his voice, or he let his voice weep. And I get the sense that, there's times where it says, and, cried out with a great cry. There's other idioms in Hebrew for weeping. But here I get the sense, because it's on the heels of him not being able to constrain himself, that he's been withholding weeping. We've seen him weep, but he goes and hides himself. He goes into a private room and weeps. And then he gets composure and goes back out, right? We've seen that before. Here, he lets the weeping out. And so we see Joseph as a very deep feeler. He has great love for his family. He's been through so much, and he's just letting it all come out. And it says at the end of verse 2 is beautiful. Vayishma'u Mitzrayim, Vayishma Beit Paro. And Egypt heard, and the house of Pharaoh heard. So him giving to letting his voice out in weeping goes, it says, to Egypt and even to the house of Pharaoh. Now, obviously, it doesn't mean all Egypt, but it means that the if you imagine circles of distance, of increasing distance, it wasn't just his brothers that heard his weeping, even though he had sent these others attendants out. Verse 3, Vayomer Yosef el Echav, and Joseph said to his brothers, Ani Yosef, Ani Yosef, I am Joseph. Ha'od avi chai. So the first thing he says after saying, I am Joseph, he says, Ha'od, yet, still, that's what Ha'od, avi, my father, chai, lives. So in English, it says, is my father still alive? But really, it's still my father alive. And it says, Velo yachlu echav la'anot oto. His brothers were not able to answer him. And the last time we've seen Velo yachlu before, in Genesis 37, when it says Velo yachlu dabero leshalom, they were not able to handle his speaking with shalom. They had no, remember it said they hated him. They were not able, it said there. Here we see that brothers again, velo yachlu, but this time, velo yachlu achav la'anot oto. They were not able to answer him. Ki nivhalu mipanav. Ki nivhalu mipanav. Ki, that's for, nivhalu. They were terrified of him. Nifhalu mipanav. They say terrified in his presence. Some translations have this, they were dismayed or something. I don't like that. They were scared. Like, this is a tidal wave, a tsunami of mind-blowing, world-shifting, lie-dispelling, right? Their cover is blown in terms of their 20-year conspiracy from their father. Like, this is all wide open now. And so Nifhalu mipanav, I think terrified here that the NASB has, is a really good translation. Verse 4, Vayomer Yosef el Echav, and Joseph said to his brothers, Geshuna Elai, come now to me, please come to me. Geshuna. Then it says, Vayyiggashu, and they drew near. Remember, the name of our Torah portion is Vayyiggash, back several verses in chapter 44, where it says, Vayyiggash elav Yehuda, and Joseph came or drew near him. Here, we just have the plural of the same verse, of the same verb, Vayyiggashu, and they came near. Vayomer, and he said, right, again, Ani Yosef achichem, I am Joseph, your brother. So they're still, right, they're terrified. They're probably looking at each other. They don't know what to do. This is the guy who's in charge of all Egypt, all of a sudden completely rattling their world. And he's telling them something that's unbelievable to them. Ani Yosef achichem, asher machartem oti Mitzrayma, whom y'all sold. The one y'all sold, that is, you sold me Mitzrayim, Egypt, to Egypt, basically. Mitzrayim means Egypt word, if you remember that locative hey here. Mitzrayim, Mitzrayimah means Egypt word. You sold me to Egypt. Ve'eta, but now. Al te'atzvu, do not be grieved. So we have a nifal here. Te'atzvu, do not be grieved. Ve'al yichar be'enechem, do not let it be, this is a curious phrase, do not let it be literally charaz, to be heat, to be angry, to have heat, but it means do not let it be a source of anger in your eyes or upsetting in your eyes. Ki machartem oti heina, that y'all sold me here. So he's not denying what happened. He's speaking the truth. Remember when he named his sons Menashe and Ephraim, it said, for God has caused me to forget. But that had to do with the emotional pain that he came to be okay because God was with him. It doesn't mean he forgot the facts of the matter. Certainly he still knows what happened. Ki machartem oti heina, that y'all sold me here. And then here, ki lemechya shlachani Elohim lifnechem, because for mechya, for life. Isn't that wonderful? It says to save lives, but it's for giving life, for life. Shlachani Elohim lifnechem. God has sent me before you. So it's so wonderful. Joseph knows that there's difficult things that have happened. He was wronged, right? He had every right in this world to be upset and deeply hurt and wounded, and he had most definitely been betrayed by those who were supposed to protect him, his older brothers. They failed, and he has every right to have a complaint against them. But guess what? As we've seen time and time again, Joseph views his life not through his own personal hurts and his own personal need for vindication or need to get even, or a motive of hatred or anything like that. It's always what God has done. He named his two sons, Ephraim and Menashe, because of what God had done. God had caused me to forget. God has made me fruitful. And here he says, he's telling his brothers, he's trying to convey that. It sounds like a simple theological lesson, but it is a profound truth. He's encouraging them to adopt his viewpoint, to trust him. When he says, God sent me before you to save lives, for the purpose of life. You meant something for death. God is doing something for life. So is Joseph just telling himself a nice story so that he can handle the pain? Is Joseph lying? Is this just a lie? You know, some in the field of religious studies and evolutionary psychology, they say, religion, stories of God is what did Marx call it? A opiate for the masses. That religion is an opiate. What that means is that life is so painful. Humans have such a painful time in life. They need to tell themselves fantastic stories to help ease the pain. So that's your materialist, Marxist kind of critique, if you will, of the world. That there's so much suffering in the world that humans have devised ways to tell them stories and pretend so that they can avoid the pain and numb the pain. Now, I would say, yeah, sometimes I would say that happens a lot in the world. There's people who lie to themselves in order to avoid the pain. I'm not saying that never happens, but I'm saying when it comes to the Creator, we're talking about the God of Israel here, the Holy One, the Creator of heaven and earth, who has a covenant plan here. Joseph is not lying to himself. Joseph has seen God's deliverance over and over and over again. He's seen the success and the favor that God has given him in these, whether he was in prison or he's in a Egyptian house or in a prison or even in the house of Pharaoh himself. God has blessed him over and over and over again. And Joseph continues to, as Yeshua says, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these other things will be added to you. Joseph understands that. And he wants to convey that to his brothers who are in disbelief because they are nifhalu mipenechem. It says they are terrified of him. After all, he's basically like Pharaoh. He's the most powerful person in the world as far as they're concerned. And they were so afraid of him already. And they know that their lives and the lives of their family due to the famine is contingent upon a good rapport with this man. And all of a sudden he sends all his attendants out and starts weeping loud enough that it says Egypt can hear, Vayishma, Beit Pharaoh and the house of Pharaoh can hear. And all of a sudden he says, Ani Yosef, Ha'od Avi Chai, right? I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? And they're just flabbergasted. But he's telling them, this is the truth. Do not be disturbed. Do not be troubled that you did this to me. He's beyond forgiving them. He's teaching them why this had to happen. It's wonderful and mind-blowing. God sent me before you to save life. Isn't that wonderful? He wants his brothers to understand his viewpoint of the history of events. Because what's their brother's viewpoint? Without this message from Joseph, what are they thinking? They're thinking, well, we know with the whole situation when he was testing them, their communication to each other. We didn't listen. We refused to listen to his pleas for compassion. When he pleaded for his life, we refused to listen. They were deeply troubled. And so here, that's what they're thinking. Like their best case scenario in their eyes is probably, yeah, he's going to, even if he is Joseph, he's going to get revenge. Because the how do you say it? What's the capacity for thought in their hearts? We're limited by, remember our thoughts are projections. The ceiling of their thought does not have forgiveness. It does not have grace. So they think the worst. And we know that this is true because at the end of Genesis, in Genesis 50, after Jacob dies, they come to Joseph and say, hey, you remember, before he died, Dad said, you have to forgive us. And then again, Joseph weeps. And we know he weeps there because they don't believe him. Even though he's told them here, look, you need to trust me. You need to look at this. You need to look at the last 20 years from my viewpoint. You need to look at it the way I look at it, which is God is doing something for good. And the only way the brothers can go from their fear of retaliation and their self loathing, probably, for having conspired against their father. They probably have great shame. How are they going to come out of that deep pit, that deep dark pit that they put their own souls in? They literally put Joseph in a pit, but what did they do to their own souls? How are they going to get out of that spiritual pit? They have to trust Joseph. They weren't there for all his suffering. They weren't there for the victories, though, that God gave him in the midst of that darkness. They didn't see what he saw. They didn't go through what Joseph went through. But he, in all his confidence, in full confidence and trust in God, can say to them with the most pure heart and the truest intent, and look right into their eyes while he's weeping and saying, look, yes, you sold me here, but God sent me here before you for a good purpose, for life, for our families. The only thing that can transport them from this pit of self-hatred and fear to the joy that Joseph has right now is faith. They can't see it. They didn't see what Joseph's been through for 20 years. But the path he's been on has led him to this very moment. And he's saying, trust me. God meant this for good, to save life, for a mighty deliverance. And this is the fact of the matter. There's nothing they can say to bump Joseph off his perspective, right? Joseph's perspective is the truth. Joseph's perspective is the truth. He's standing on rock here when he says this. He knows it in every cell of his being, and he wants desperately for his brothers. He knows that they must be feeling bad and shameful, ashamed, and all the bad things. He knows that. That's why he says, don't feel that way. He understands. Joseph is such a great, it's such a beautiful story of it. It never tells us Joseph forgave his brothers. There's no verse that says, and Joseph forgave. We know that he forgave them by his actions. We know that he forgave them by this passage. But the Bible never has to tell us, and so, after hours of, prayer, Joseph finally, forgave his brothers. There's no verse. But we look at it and we know he did. In the same way, where, it says the friends brought their paralytic friend on a pallet, and they tore through the roof and put him down in front of Yeshua. And it says, and seeing their faith, right? And that Yeshua saw their faith. Well, it never said they had faith. It never said they believed. Yeshua says, and seeing their faith, he said, don't worry, your sins are forgiven, right? It's awesome. All right. This is an awesome thing. I see, thanks for the note. There are so many beautiful parallels between Joseph and Yeshua. Absolutely. These are beautiful stories. Thanks, you guys, for listening in here. I'm going to do another one for the Telos Torah channel, just because I like to do one short one on each channel. So I'm going to hop over there in a couple of minutes and do another verse from the same chapter, from Genesis chapter 5. All right, friends, a big Shabbat Shalom to you all. And thanks for tuning in. I hope this stirs you up to want to just spend more time in the Word and maybe dive into your Hebrew studies as well. All right, Shalom.